Let's find out.
Do you get a picture here?
Is it
Well, we're all
recorded right
gonna,
Yes, it is.
you know.
Because half the time when I start the film, you look at the camera and go,
Yeah, it's so funny, Tyler. Every time it's so funny.
not that I haven't watched any films before, but I noticed that every time.
So, what were the major differences between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists? How did the arguments of the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists reflect their points of view regarding natural rights, republicanism, and the powers of the states? Why are the Federalists and Anti-Federalist debates still relevant today? You got time, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And then you
Got notes?
I got described.
read.
Go.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. Thus, Thomas Jefferson asserted in the Declaration of Independence, officially declaring independence from Great Britain's rule. The American revolutionary ideals of freedom and self-government were advocated for by both the Federalists and Anti-Federalists. However, each group's plan about how to achieve these ideals greatly differed.
Federalist Alexander Hamilton stated, "It's not tyranny we desire, it's a just, limited federal government." Anti-Federalists believed a federal government would infringe upon basic liberties, and that small state governments could therefore better govern and protect the people. These different beliefs stemmed from 18th century theories, such as Montague's writings on republicanism and Locke's treatises on natural rights. However, even though its roots are venerable, the Federalist-Anti-Federalist debate remains relevant today. Federalists and Anti-Federalists disagreed about the size of a republican form of government, while Federalists, such as James Madison, thought that a large republic would control factions and other destructive forces. Brutus I counters that. In a republic of the extent of this continent, the people at large would know little of their proceedings. The people in general would be acquainted with very few of the rulers. The people at large would know little of their proceedings, and it would be extremely difficult to change them, expressing the Anti-Federalist and classical Republican view that Republican government can only function in small communities.
Similarly, both Federalists and Anti-Federalists sought to protect natural rights in the Constitution. Federalists saw natural rights as sufficiently protected in the body of the Constitution. For example, Article 1, Section 9 prevents Congress from suspending habeas corpus and passing bills of attainder or ex post facto laws, laying out the foundation for due process, which protects the natural rights to life, liberty, and property. The Anti-Federalists thought that their rights need to be specifically stated, that is, they desired a Bill of Rights. The Anti-Federalists felt that to protect these natural rights, states should have more sovereignty because they will understand the needs of their people and their proximity better than national government.
Arguing against support as a strong state power, James Madison stated in Federalist 10, "The smaller the number of individuals composing a majority, and the smaller the compass within which they are placed, the more easily will they concert and execute their plans of oppression." Madison's words were confirmed with the institution of the Jim Crow laws at the end of the 19th century, which allowed Southern state and local governments to limit the rights of African Americans and systematize racism in the South.
A landmark event in the struggle between state and national power was the 1819 Supreme Court decision of McCulloch v. Maryland. The state of Maryland tried to tax the national bank, but the Supreme Court ruled that Maryland could not impede congressional power to make necessary and proper laws, affirming the power of the national government and the legitimacy of the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, which states that the Constitution and the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof are the supreme law of the land.
The Federalist and Anti-Federalist debates were seen in 1819 with the struggle between state and national power and are still applicable today. Section 125 of the Patriot Act authorizes government to obtain any tangible evidence relevant to a terrorist investigation, even if there is no evidence pertaining to suspected terrorist activities. Anti-Federalists would argue it is in violation of the right to privacy protected in the Fourth Amendment, but Federalists would dispute that it is worth that violation to help the national government better protect the people.
The debate is also seen in online gambling, which is only legal in Nevada, Delaware, and New Jersey. However, at least 10 other states are proposing new or expanded internet betting. Gambling regulations have been controlled by the states, but with the recent expansion of online gambling, the issue of the federal government creating a federal online gambling ban could arise. These debates provide valuable insight into the ideals of freedom and self-government, which have inspired people worldwide from Cicero's Roman Republic to the uprisings in the Arab Spring. Thank you.
If you were around during the debate of the Constitution, would you have been a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist, and why?
I would have been an anti-federalist because as it is seen today, the Bill of Rights have been very pertinent to our society, especially because their addition means that there's an amendment process which can keep the Constitution up to date with what's going on in society today.
I would be a Federalist because the Federalists were all about promotion of the common good, and you can see with their them not wanting to have a Bill of Rights, it wasn't as important to them to have a specific set of limitations on government that was so meticulous. And that's the power of the federal government has been extremely helpful to the country as a whole, and I think the Federalists were more in support of that.
Robert Yates writes in Brutus 4, "The object of every free government is that of the public good, and all lesser interests yield to it. Therefore, I would be an anti-federalist because, from the Anti-Federalist Papers, although they were more concerned with individual rights, they also saw the importance and necessity of the common good."
Molly, you talked about the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights doesn't come important to this country until the addition of the 14th Amendment, and not until 1925 when they finally become incorporated. But wait, the Bill of Rights, or excuse me, the 14th Amendment heavily limited states' power. So where would the Anti-Federalists have been in this creation of incorporation of Bill of Rights as a trample on state sovereignty? And I'm not just picking on you.
Well, the original intent of the 14th Amendment, as presented by Representative John Bingham, was that it should incorporate Amendments 1 through 8. And although I think that the Anti-Federalists, would not agree with the fact that states' bills of rights are becoming less and less important, I think they would be happier with the fact that it is through selective incorporation and not total incorporation that, well, incorporation is process.
My turn.
Sure.
So,
I think I'm going. Go ahead.
so do you think small homogeneous communities better protect the rights of individuals?
No, I do not. James Madison writes in Federalist 10 about the violence of factions, and in small homogeneous communities, the violence of factions can become a majority. Therefore, in large heterogeneous countries such as the United States, the majority of faction will never be possible. There are many minorities of factions, but those cannot infringe upon individual rights.
We can see this in the 2013 government shutdown when the Tea Party made they're a minority party, and they made it so that the federal budget for that time couldn't be passed.
On the other hand, a small homogeneous community would represent the people in power very well. So, although it may trample on the rights of minorities, a small homogeneous community is absolutely dedicated to the principle of majority rule.
Constitution in favor of majority rule, or is it more lean towards protecting minority rights?
Well, with the Connecticut Compromise of equal representation in the Senate and proportional representation in the House of Representatives, James Madison thought that that was a complete sacrifice of the principle of majority rule, so he would argue that it was unjustly protecting minority rights instead of majority rule.
Going back to the earlier question of if you were an anti-federalist or federalist, how would the stance that you took, how would you respond to immigration control?
Well, anti-federalists would see it put up to the states to decide their immigration control. The issue with this is that some states could abuse this power, as seen in the court case Arizona v. United States, where the Supreme Court ruled that 3 of the provisions took away federal power, and so Arizona couldn't use those as laws for immigration.
Also, being an anti-federalist, states should be able to create their own laws based on immigration, because California immigration is very different than Arizona, and also the northern border is very different than the southern border, where we're not as concerned with people coming down from Canada, but we're very concerned with people with immigrants coming through the southern border.
But what if we have just as much immigration from the northern borders as we have 10% less illegal immigration on the northern border than the southern border?
As it's perceived in the media, though, most people see it as an issue coming from the southern border.
Okay, that's perception, but let's talk about an actuality. How does that actually play into this idea of immigration and state's power?
Well, that's when it becomes, as Nikki was saying, California, or I guess actually our state, Nevada, isn't as in much of a conflict about immigration laws because they're not a bordering state of the north or the south.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
We have one of the highest percentage of legal immigrants per capita in the United States because we have a service industry economy which brings in local workers, which then brings lots of immigrants. Be careful.
But then again, we don't have the same power that Texas and Arizona do because, as Molly said, we're not on the border. So while we may want certain immigration policies to go into effect, Nevada itself can't institute them.
Does the United States still fit the standard of a small, homogeneous community?
Definitely not. As we're just talking about with immigration, there are a lot of different viewpoints throughout the country, and it's not necessarily a bad thing though, because if we were all homogeneous, we wouldn't get the different viewpoints of different people, and maybe different parties or people have better ways or ideas on how to improve government.
So before this, we talked about how the minority has certain rights over the majority and how essentially in the United States it's no longer the majority ruling but the minority. Then how come in our Congress, our 113 Congress, the majority is still white, yet we still have white laws being passed? Or like, does that make sense?
What do you mean?
Why is the power still in 1% of the people rather than everyone else?
Well, unfortunately, in many people's views, it's unfortunate that we, as the United States under the Constitution, have not abolished the whole idea of primogeniture. So the fact that wealthy white people pass on their wealth to other white people who then become wealthy makes it easier for wealthy white people to become elected to office because things like advertising make money such a big deal in getting elected.
What common ground did the Federalists and Anti-Federalists have? We talked about their differences a ton, but where were they? Yeah.
The Anti-Federalists and the Federalists, they found common ground within doing what was best for the country to move forward within a new plan of government. Each group's plan about how to I guess define these governments were very different, but essentially they wanted what was best for the country. Even though the Anti-Federalists were very wary of a strong central government, they only felt those views because they thought that was what was best for the country.
Agreeing with Nikki, they both also saw, they thought common good and individual rights should be protected, although the Anti-Federalists are known as wanting more individual rights stated through the Bill of Rights. The Federalists agreed that there should be individual rights, they just felt that they were stated in the body of the Constitution, such as in Article 1, Section 9, when it says Congress can't make any bills of attainder or ex post facto laws.
And of the 55 delegates to the convention, there were 16 who didn't sign, but many of those, 7 of them, just left because they had business to attend to. So I think that the fact that only 4 delegates left the convention because they were dissatisfied shows that both the Federalists and Anti-Federalists were invested in making this Constitution best for everyone.
Any of those important of those 4?
Yes, certainly there were 2 delegates from New York. That was Robert Yates and John Lansing Jr. And that left Alexander Hamilton alone, and that meant New York did not have a vote at the convention.
Robert Yates become important later on?
Yes, he wrote the Brutus Papers, and those were big in the Anti-Federalists.
About George Mason?
Yeah, well, he stayed. He was not one of the 4 that left.
Yes, he is. He never signed it.
He didn't, but he was there while they signed
Well,
it.
then maybe that, because he becomes important to the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debate in terms of that Bill of
Oh,
Rights thing.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so make sure you include that. Go ahead, gentlemen, comments?
Is the Tea Party a government party?
Is it?
You said it was. So be careful.
Political party.
What does it count as? Like a coalition?
It's like a fun company.
It's a wing. Yeah, it's not a coalition, it's a wing of the Republican Party.
Okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
When you talk about factions, I would refer to the Great Britain government because they don't have a binary, so you're not a Democrat or Republican, but you have a lot more. So that's definitely factions checking majority rule and like minorities coming together.
They have to form coalitions. That's what they do. Right.
And then once again, link the questions together. So first question, like Federalist or Anti-Federalist. Some of you say the common good, and then the next question is Bill of Rights. What do the Anti-Federalists think? Well, you can extend the idea of common good because they want everyone to have these rights. And then the immigration question, link it back to majority rule. If the majority of people who are making the law is white or born in this country, they're not going to really care about immigration. They're just going to want them to go get out of the country, so that's where you have that idea of majority rule, the minority checking the majority.
Where's the Constitution in the argument, other than the Bill of Rights? That's a major key I think you're missing in your cross-ex, is what parts of the Constitution, other than the Bill of Rights, play into the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debates, all right? So I think that's something, and that can then help you with your testimony in terms of classical, what's the question?
Yeah, classical republicanism, and then the stances that you
What are the major conflicts? How does limited government protect individual rights when promoting the common good? Those things then link to each other in that Federalist and Anti-Federalist debate to bring the Constitution in, right? I think you guys have really, really strong answers, but you missed the Constitution in that. Where can we bring the Constitution into this debate? Because that's what they were debating the whole time, okay? And then bring it to today like you did and other current events that you had, which were awesome. That was that missing element. And then, where's majority rule in the Constitution? That goes, it's once again the same answer, but what about what amendments needed, supermajorities, electoral college, amendment process, all those different things under this idea of majority rule, okay? What states have the most power right here?
Florida? Oh. California?
California, Texas, right? Majority rule. So those are some of those similar ideas, okay? Testimony was good. Your I know I'm beating on you. Your cross-section was really good. You guys have a good understanding of it. Nikki, you threw out some quotes out there, and then that was awesome. I want you guys to get better with the Constitution because that's your missing element. All right, you guys are done. Get out of here.
Good seeing you.
Good seeing you too. You as well. How's yours? Ate a lot. Go home. You stay here.
No, I went on.
So it was warm here.
Was it? I just know I came back on Tuesday after and it was cold.
And it's we the people in northern Nevada. It's supposed to snow. Shocker. That's what always happens. District competition is always snowing, except for last year. Who's this for? You too? You want me to help them? You take your notes? Okay.
I'll pop my head in on Saturday.
You helping?
No, because I worked that day, but I'm still at the university. Thank you, Henry.
Thanks for help.
Of course.
If we qualify for state,
Definitely. And you mean when?
if we qualify, I am a realist.
We just,
Realist.
There's good wood right there. Knock on some of those. This is particle board.
it's not really what.
That is. So, all right.
Where'd you park?
Outside.
Outside. I'll really park your car in the